Hey guys, welcome to the Herbal Hour, episode 20, Habits for Health with Alexander Heyne.
Hello, good sir. It's excellent to have you on the podcast. So today we're going to be talking about habits and how difficult it is to change habits, why it's important to change habits for better health. So you wrote an excellent book. It's called Master the Day. It's quite good. I read through most of it, and it's very just straightforward information, as I was telling you, very honest about all the difficulties you had with habit change. And I feel like there's this assumption with people that if they're very successful or they're, doing good things, that, they were just born like that, or, they got lucky and, oh, that's not me. But from what I understand, you also had difficulties changing a lot of the habits that led to you being quite successful. How many YouTube subscribers do you have these days?
Right around 300,000.
Wow, that's pretty good. So yeah, I guess let's start with the money question right away. Mm-hmm. Why is it so difficult to make habit changes?
I think because a lot of it is that people think it's about the right information, right? People think if I just had the perfect plan, that's one of those erroneous beliefs. If I had the perfect plan, it would be easy. If I had the perfect money-making scheme, it'd be easy. If I had the perfect person to date, it'd be easy. But those are scapegoats, right? Because it's a cop-out to think that you just need to get handed this perfect thing on the platter and it's all going to be cake. And I think one of the reasons is that people downplay the importance of their own psychology. So a lot of it is how are you going to have someone change their life when every time they've tried to lose weight, for 20 years they failed? There's such a deeply ingrained story that I just can never do it. And so there's this learned helplessness where people, after a few years of doing that, you just kind of do it half-assed. There's almost no reason to even really commit.
So it's you've tried to make the change and you failed and now you have the story of I just can't make any changes, and that's it. You kind of accept that as a way of being. So you talk in your book about how narratives are one of the biggest detriments to making any kind of change. Can you explain this idea a little bit more, what a narrative is and what its effect is in actually making lifestyle change?
Yeah, I think the thing we're not conscious of is what subconsciously is being told to ourselves. So it often starts consciously, right? It's oh man, this is so difficult. Losing weight or dating or being in a marriage, oh, this is frustrating, difficult. It kind of never works out. But eventually it becomes a subconscious kind of story where we begin to expect that there are no good men left, that it's never not going to be a struggle. It's always going to be a struggle to get fit and healthy. If I want to have my dream body, it means I'm never going to eat any food I want to eat. Or that, just like my parents, my relationships are probably going to be like that. Or I'm going to be depressed just like my mom always was. Or,
you know what? It's kind of true. It probably will be like that unless you do something to change it. Because the default mode network, it's very common in parenting that the way your parents brought you up, the way your mom and dad treated you is how you habitually will raise your children if you don't put in any specific effort or attention. I think it's something adaptational. I was actually thinking about it, that we mimic our parents in a deep level. From a young age, and we kind of ingrain these patterns of how does mom act, how does dad act, and then we take those patterns and we use them to kind of how we function and how we act automatically when we're not thinking about it, and also for raising children. So how do you go in and change that story? Because it's pretty deep, because it doesn't even seem like a story to most people. The idea of every time I try to find a good girl, it just doesn't work out. Every time I try to find a good boyfriend, he always treats me wrong. Right. And that's just me. And it feels like it's just the truth that you learned. It doesn't feel like it's a story.
It feels more like evidence.
Yeah, it seems like
a story.
Evidence.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, it is evidence because we cherry pick, or sometimes it is all the case. I think the big thing is you just look for evidence of the opposite in the world. So if you think, there are no good men left, well, try to find one person that, find a female friend that's married or dating a guy that's a good guy. And then you're all right, so maybe there's at least one on earth. So for me, it's never I never try to convince myself or anyone else of a different story, because you're trying to devalue their life experience and saying that that's not true when they know it's true. So you're not going to out-convince someone of that. So what I found is a realistic or useful exercise is just to have them look for the evidence of the contrary in their life or in someone else's life. So, even though they themselves may not be able to be there are great people out there, or maybe I can really lose weight. Maybe they can find other people like them that have. So, I found like one case study I featured was this one guy that went from being lifelong overweight. He was over 300 pounds, then got a six pack later in life, like in his late 30s, early 40s. This is a guy who his only vegetable he'd ever eaten in his life was like canned green beans down south. He didn't even know really what a vegetable meant. He thought like a potato was like a vegetable, like it was like a healthy vegetable, and most of those potatoes were fried. And so
I wish that was a healthy vegetable.
I know,
man.
right?
They're delicious.
So I basically the first thing is I have people look for evidence that there is something else other than their experience like that.
So obviously habits are the foundation of health, right? Because what we do most of the time is how our health is. Like it's not, the little bit of cake we eat once a week that makes us overweight. It's actually our daily, 3 times a day meals. It's our exercise pattern. It's our typical response to, let's say you plan to like work out, but you don't do it. And it becomes this kind of typical response. So how do you get out of that cycle of not being able to make the habit changes, first of all, but even more importantly, how do you know which habits are the ones that you should make the change?
Yeah, that's a combination of just experience and even expertise of other people. So that's the value of finding like someone who has experience in the thing you want to do. But the most obvious one is really unsexy. It's just that you look at the new year, right? You go into the gym and people are doing like a 2-hour workout their first day in the gym. After
They're like setting
5
themselves
years.
up for failure, right?
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who are like professional fitness competitors that don't even do 2 hours a day. So it's like, especially with fitness, because the feedback cycle, the feedback loop is like you're going to be so sore. Like you're not going to want to get out of bed. So it's really finding the minimum effective dose. If like 20 minutes of a walk leaves you feeling good, that's what you should do. It's not to try to get like the gangbuster results. It's to create a habit at a certain level where you like doing the habit. So the in the short run, it's do the habits that make you feel good, because then you're building that positive association with exercise or with dating, with whatever, rather than every time you're trying to kill it and you're not going to kill it the first time.
That's a really crucial point. Have you heard of Faraz Sahabi? He is kind of a coach, exercise guider, and for MMA champions. He works with a lot. I think he worked with George St. Pierre, very famous MMA fighter who has a strong wrestling background. But one of the main things that he emphasizes is just what you said. Do the littlest amount that gives you that benefit, but just do it every day. So he says, don't go into the gym, for 2 hours and kill it, because the next day you're going to be super sore. And one, you're not going to want to work out ever again because you basically just traumatized your body to be afraid of what you just did. Because it might have felt good in the moment, but your body's like, gym equals 2 hours of pain. And your body is just like, don't do the gym ever. That sounds like a terrible idea. And obviously you can't work out consistently. But what he said is do enough so that you get some kind of benefit, but don't train till you get sore. Which is kind of against all of the common knowledge of like, yeah, when you lift weights and when you exercise, you should be sore the next day. He says just do that little amount every day. And then in the long run, when you kind of look at the bigger picture, you actually have more time in the gym. So somebody who just like kills themselves, 2 hours in the gym, like once a week or maybe once every other week, because it messes them up so much. They get, let's say, like 4 hours per month of workout time. But somebody who just goes into the gym for like 30 minutes a day, in the end, they get way more. If they're doing it consistent, like 5 days a week or something like that. And when you zoom out, they have way more hours. So if it's like in a competitive environment, like let's say you're training to be like a fighter, martial artist, dancer, or something like that, you're basically training against other people who will also be doing the same thing. So in the end, you want to have more total hours of skill development, not just like more intensity of skill development.
Totally.
Or you could just run yourself into the ground every single day, and then when you're 30, you can't even walk around.
Yeah.
That's also a choice.
I mean, you look at the New Year's resolution crowd. I mean, what is it? What's the stat? It's like by March 1st, what percentage is gone? Like 80%? That's not even 100 days. So
I've also heard the point that the whole New Year's thing is kind of ridiculous from like, I guess like an astrological or like seasons perspective. Because like, why are you going to start a new habit in the dead of the winter?
Yeah.
Like you should wait till the spring because
good
that's what the
point.
spring is trying to.
That's totally.
It's so arbitrary. It's so stupid. Actually,
Yep.
I think that's actually part of the reason why it fails. I think if people had New Year's resolutions around the time when like life comes to birth, like when everything starts sprouting and stuff. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like changes with the seasons and how they kind of give you a different energy.
Totally.
I know that's a big thing in Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
So, what's the kind of benefit of those cumulative habits? So, I know you were talking in your book about, let's say you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to lose 40 pounds or something like that. And if you only do it for a few weeks, it's like you don't even notice that you're making the change because you might lose a pound a week. And, 3 weeks in, you lost 3 pounds and you're like, this is pointless. Like,
Right.
I'm not eating any ice cream and like, this is all I get, 3 pounds of loss. Like, I'm just going to go back to eating ice cream. Can you talk more on that like cumulative effect and tracking that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing it always comes back to the longevity of your habits and the frequency. So it's like one of the reasons for developing habits you actually like is because at the start, depending on what you're doing in your life, you won't see results sometimes for a long time. Like, okay, weight loss can maybe happen in a week or a few weeks, but building a business can take months to years. There are other things you work on. Writing a book can take months to years. And so it's not going to be this instant satisfaction you get from doing it. So you have to figure out what's the intrinsic motivation to do it, which is hopefully doing a habit you like. Because, I mean, anyone can start something, but the rarest thing in the world, especially now, is people who have the grit to see it through.
There's definitely that aspect of grit, but there's that aspect of the purpose behind it. Like if the purpose isn't strong enough, when it comes down to it, it'll be dropped. Like
Right.
if let's say the New Year's gym resolution was just to make Stacy jealous or something like that,
Yep.
that might fuel you for like 2 months, but when it gets really painful and you're trying to go for that growth, you'll be like, this isn't even really worth it, and it'll just drop off.
Totally.
So how do you recommend cultivating that why? How do you figure it out, and what do you do with that why once you know it? So like let's say you decided you want to start a business and like this is why you want to start it. How do you visualize? How do you use different techniques to, I guess, remind yourself of that why so that it keeps giving you that motivation?
I mean, I think what I've noticed, the most common whys usually come from pain. I've rarely seen them come from like positive, inspirational, feelings. It's almost always not wanting your life to continue down the road it's going. Really common in weight loss, where there's a health struggle. Really common in business where people just hate their jobs and it's like, it's such a drag for 10 hours a day. I would recommend people, there's an exercise where you just keep asking yourself why until you hit something that's emotional. So like, let's say you're like, I want to build a business. Why? Because I want financial freedom. And it's like, why? Because I want to wake up and like go to a coffee shop instead of an office. Why? Because I hate having a boss. Why? And you keep going until you hit something that actually affects you emotionally. So like what you may realize is like underneath that, you saw your dad work for 40 years at a job that he hated. And then he drank himself into a early grave. And you're like, I bet my dad would still be alive if he was doing something he really cared about. That's the thing that like hits you. And then wherever you want your reminders, on your wall or on your phone, and you're like, if you wanted to, you could be like, don't make the same mistake as dad. Or like remember dad, and the second you see that, it's gonna fit. It's gonna
hit you right in the
resonate.
Emotions.
Yeah, right in the feels.
Yeah,
So
right in the
that's
feels.
like that's what you want to look for. Like I think hunger mostly comes out of pain, not the opposite.
So is there a way to, let's say for people that don't experience the pain of the habit changes they know they need to make, let's say, their health is just kind of starting to decline and their doctor, if they go to a naturopath, tells them that, their diet's not so good, that they should exercise more. And they basically know what's right to do.
Right.
But they're not at that pain stage yet, but they still want to make the change. So they have some inklings. What do you do at that stage of the game, pre-pain?
I think the big thing is you look for external accountability. So the best thing I would say for that is either going with friends or making a bet with friends. So find another friend who's trying to do the same thing and they want to be held accountable. Because it's like one of my buddies was trying to get fit about 5 years ago, and he was trying to do it on his own, and he had kind of up and down success. And then at his office, he finally got 4 other people that wanted to do it. And then every lunch, what they would do is they'd all go work out for an hour first. And then they'd all get the same like healthy lunch. And then they would eat at their office. So every single day you've got that accountability of all your friends being like, hey, are we going to go to the gym or what? Like, what's going on? Versus if you're on your own, it's easy to cop out on yourself.
I've noticed that a lot actually with taking like group classes, like whether it's like martial arts or yoga or meditation.
Yeah.
If you have kind of a schedule and you have some reason to be there, you're like way more likely to show up. Because
Right.
let's say you just make a goal and it's like, meditate for 30 minutes a day. Like, as you were talking about in your book, and as I and yourself obviously know, that's actually surprisingly difficult. It seems like it would be the easiest thing. Like, yeah, meditate for 30 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to feel great. It's really quick, you know,
Right.
but like actually try to do that and you'll realize like, whoa, habit change is like you're dealing with your own blockages, your own inner psychology. You're dealing with things you can't even see. You're dealing
Right.
with your own sabotage that you can't even see. So going to these group environments where you have accountability is very helpful, it seems, because it adds like another factor. It adds what will people think of me if I don't show up to this?
Right.
Which is kind of superficial on some level, but in the game of lifestyle change, you got to use every factor you can get to make yourself actually make the changes.
Totally.
Or even if the goal is kind of superficial, maybe. Let's say some people go to the gym and they want to just like look really good or something. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's where the emotion is, that's what the motivation should be. You shouldn't like make some fake emotion of like, yeah, I just want to be healthy. And it's like, that's not going to make you go to the gym. But if you're like, I want to look really good so I can find a good partner, then like that emotionally will actually make you go to the gym. Otherwise, good luck.
Yeah, it's wherever the reactivity is for sure.
So we were talking also about purposes and how setting the purpose kind of beyond yourself is a really powerful motivator. So ideas like, I'm making this business so that I can support my parents, or doing this for my children, or I'm doing this, for my loved ones, or for my friends, or for my workers, for my employees. These kind of ideas that bring you outside of yourself tend to be more powerful motivators, I find, when it comes time to quit. Because if, for example, let's say you're just doing something mainly for yourself, then when you feel like crap and you don't want to do it, it's like you can. It's way easier to let yourself down than it is to let someone else down. Right. Letting someone else down is way more difficult and harder to like avoid the reality of. So that day, like let's say, you started this business for like your daughter or something, and you know that she needs like college money and all this down the line. When you're feeling like crap, like you'll remember that and you'll be like, still gotta show up because people are depending on me. Right. I think that's a big factor, not only to lifestyle change, but meaningfulness in life is having responsibility. So we tend to want to avoid responsibility, but it's really the only thing that seems to really give fulfillment. And I mean responsibility in the sense that like you're doing something good for other people and they like count on you, depend on you, or they get some benefit from what you do. And it makes it beyond yourself. So what inspired you to write this book? Why this book and not another book?
I think just people thought that weight loss or fitness was somehow different from any other goal. And I don't think it is. When you look at like the underlying fabric of human psychology, it's losing weight, building a business, being happier, being in a good relationship. It's actually all the exact same thing because it's a reflection of people's character traits, right? So hopefully I was trying to communicate that it's a book really about character, becoming the kind of person who can have the success in all those domains of life. And so I'm always interested in like, what is the universal law behind all those things? So I was like, what is the commonality between fitness and great relationships and happiness? And there are commonalities that keep showing up over and over. And it's the person. The person's the engine of it. So that's what I really wanted people to hone in on, because if you do one thing, it changes all the things. It doesn't just change your fitness life. If you're disciplined enough, you go from never working out to working out an hour a day, 5 days a week. You're going to be more disciplined in love and work and all that too.
Right. And it gives you what they call self-efficacy,
right?
Which is just a fancy word that means you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
But you don't believe in yourself because like you believe in yourself because you're sitting and saying like, I am the greatest, I am the greatest. You believe in yourself from actual experience and memory of like, that was really difficult and I did it. Oh, okay, I can do that. I can do that for something else.
Totally.
I think that's one of the major benefits actually of martial arts. Why it seems like it's just like a physical activity like any other. But the aspect of kind of bringing yourself into a fearful state all the time, because sparring, you can get hit. You will get hit.
Right.
You might get injured. It's not exactly comfortable. It's very uncomfortable when you put yourself there.
Yep.
And once you're done with it, you feel such elation because everything else seems very dull in comparison.
Right.
It's like in Fight Club. I don't know if you probably saw Fight Club, right? Mm-hmm. Where he just was like sitting in the office after like his Fight Club that he had underground, and everything was just like so dull. He wasn't even like stressed by work anymore. He was just like, this is like all nonsense, all of this. Like that's not real fear. It's not real emotions.
Right.
So being that we are going to be practicing physicians soon within the year, when do you guys graduate?
6 months.
So you're, for our listeners, you're in the Chinese medicine program and going to be doing acupuncture and things of that nature. And I'm in the naturopathic program. So for people like us, I think this is a worthy discussion to have. So we're trying to help other people make habit change too.
Right.
Obviously, we need to do that ourselves, or else like you shouldn't be giving people advice. There's plenty of Instagram fakers who are just like, yeah, do the thing, that you always wanted to do. And like, they're just like laying in bed all day and just like typing that up. And it's just like, that's not real.
Right.
And it probably won't help very many people because it doesn't have that kind of honesty of like, I tried, I failed, but finally I succeeded. And this is how I succeeded.
Yep.
So how do you think helping someone else make a lifestyle change is best done? Like what's your technique for that you're going to be using?
One of them is the very accountability of them paying you, right? Because even research has shown that even in psychology, like even a nominal fee, $10, those patients get better results than people who are treated for free. So there's just the accountability of I'm paying for this, I've got to do something. And honestly, the more you pay, the better the results.
Because the more they feel like they got to really do something to justify the payment.
Yeah. So honestly, paying for a service is a great way of having accountability. Because you're like, I just dropped XYZ dollars. I'm not going to show up and do nothing. Like if I'm actually holding them accountable and I'm like, all right, next week, I want you to write down everything you ate. Don't change anything. Just write down for self-awareness. And then they come in and then they didn't do it. And you look kind of dumb, right? It's the same accountability to your friends. You're like, it's weird. And then I'm like, all right, make sure you have it next week. People will more often do that when they're paying you.
That's a really, really key insight. And what people will see when they go to a naturopath is a lot of times they might just give general recommendations, but they can give you the tools to actually do the thing. So like sometimes you'll go in and they'll tell you what you already know, but for some reason, when you have a physician tell you and they're trying to support you in it and you obviously paid, you kind of made a implicit commitment and it's way more likely that you'll actually do it. Yeah. So that's I guess the value of, help in dietary counseling and things like that. Right. There is a field of study. It's a technique. I think I told you about it before. You might have heard of it. Motivational interviewing. Mm-hmm. And basically what that is how do you help someone make lifestyle changes? How do you guide them through the difficulties that they're having with it? How do you define what they even want to make? And it kind of follows acronym. It's the first one is DARN, and then the next one is ORS. DARN basically is eliciting the reasons and the motivation for making the change. So the D stands for desires. Mm-hmm. So do they want to make the change? What change do they want to make? Why? A is abilities. How could they make the change? What abilities do they have? What has worked in the past? Kind of like an assessment of like, what do I got? What tool set do I have to make this change? Right. R is reasons. So reasons as in like, for my daughter, for my family, or because I want to be healthy. And then N is needs. Like, why do I need to make this change? What are my needs? Like, gotta, pay for my house, but I want to do it in a way that's meaningful to me also. Right. So, and then ORS has to do with open-ended questions. Mm-hmm. So asking very wide-ranging questions and not like pushing things on people. So like if someone wanted to make a lifestyle change, you ask them very general questions like, why do you want to make that change? Why do you think that'd be helpful? Right. What are some ways that you think you could do it? And it's actually pretty fascinating, but people have the answers that they need already. All it is just eliciting. And we kind of do that with ourselves, actually. Yeah. That process of motivational interviewing is something we just do internally if you're trying to make a habit change. Then you also summarize it back, and there's other factors, but the whole thing, and I think this applies also for internal change, is making them give the positive answer that supports them. So, for example, instead of let's say somebody wants to quit smoking or something like that, instead of saying you should quit smoking, so the when you say you should quit smoking to somebody, what they automatically do, and this is just human nature, they go and get into a defensive stance, and then they argue against themselves. So they'll give you all the reasons why they're still smoking. They'll be like, it helps me with stress. I can't deal with my wife if I don't have a cigarette or two. I love it with my coffee or something like that. Yeah. So you just made them argue against themselves, against making habit change. Right. But if you give the point, this is like an interesting psychology thing. If you affirm their reasons, they'll start defending the other side. So if you say, yeah, smoking really does help you deal with stress, doesn't it? And then like the instant tendency is like, yeah, I know it does, but, and then they're going to start arguing for the positive change. Now they're bringing out a narrative that actually is going to help them make the change. And I think that little factor is just so crucial. And it's the reason why maybe like 90% of medical professionals aren't successful in making, helping patients make those changes that they need to make, like diet and everything. Because they tell them, you should eat a better diet, stop eating chicken wings. And they're like, well, I want to eat chicken wings because of this and that, and because it makes me feel good. Yeah. But if you're like, yeah, you should eat chicken wings, like if that makes you feel good. And then they'll be like, well, I don't really feel good. All right, let's start talking from there and keep the thing open. And I think it has to do with, at the fundamental level, and this applies internally when you're trying to make a habit change, is being respectful of the autonomy of another person. So like we start from a point where we don't actually know what's right for the person. We have to just admit that we don't know. Maybe it is right for them. There was a really interesting, have you heard about the ACE study? Mm-hmm. The adverse childhood events, where they basically looked at how early childhood traumas they lead to all sorts of different illnesses and alcoholism and all of that. And it seems to point out that somebody drinks alcohol to an alcoholic level, not because they made that choice, but they're predisposed to using that as a coping strategy. And in some ways it works for them. So when you try to make someone not drink alcohol, you're taking away a crutch that they have, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to replace it with something, because right, if you just take away alcohol, maybe they'll just go to heroin or something. I mean, why not? They still, it has a purpose in their life. And I think our goal as like physicians and also for ourselves is find out, what is this negative behavior doing for me? Right. I think that's important to ask. Like, what does this bad habit do for me? And you talk about that in your book of like, what was the case? There was this guy who worked a really stressful job, and then he just like had to come home and drink beers and eat Chinese food. Yeah. And that was just the way he coped.
Right.
Right. So what are some habit changes that you found big difficulty in making, and how'd you kind of find your way around those?
I mean, for me, a big one was probably not drinking coffee daily. And for me, it was just one of those things where it's like, it wasn't that disabling. Like, it would give me some acid reflux every now and then. And it wasn't like I was even drinking coffee multiple times a day. It was just my GI was really reacting to it. And I found that any kind of quitting related habit just didn't work. And so I find the intermediate step, like you mentioned, is like if you remove somebody's crutch that makes them feel well, they're just going to go into something else. But if you preemptively do that, like for me, a replacement of one of those herbal blends like Ticino or Dandy blend, I think it's called.
Like chicory root and dandelion root and things like that, like coffee alternatives.
I think like swapping is a really good habit strategy. So it's like if you're accustomed every afternoon to going out to that coffee shop to get a cookie from work, because that's like your afternoon pick-me-up, you should probably still keep the ritual and try to get something a little bit different, but still allow yourself to get like a snack to begin with. Because otherwise that craving is going to be really strong. So swapping is one of the strategies that can help a lot.
And finding like healthy alternatives. I know that's a key aspect in the treatment of addiction, is finding like healthy outlets to give the same kind of effects that are different. So like, let's say somebody smokes cigarettes to make themselves, de-stress, like after work or when they're stressed, right? Yeah. Well, the whole active cigarette smoking has a lot of things to it that are not seen. So there's the social aspect. Maybe they go outside with their coworkers and they also smoke with them, and it gives a kind of like bonding aspect. Maybe it gets them outside. Some people don't even go outside unless they smoke cigarettes. Yeah. So maybe just get them outside in the fresh air, and that feels nice, and they kind of associate that niceness with the cigarette. Right. And the cigarette kind of trains you because it does stimulate dopamine release in the body. So everything that's going on in your environment, it kind of entrains it all together. That's why long-term smokers have a really hard time quitting, because they have this like habit that they need to like do something with their hands, like eat a lollipop or something like that. Right. But yeah, so there's those positive benefits in that, right? Like the social aspect. Maybe instead of the smoking, maybe, you go outside with like a hacky sack and you just hacky sack with your friends. Now you're like breathing outside the fresh air, you're getting some physical activity, and it's something fun that you like to do. Right. And you replace that bad habit. Yeah. What do you do when you fail miserably? When you're making a habit change, and it will happen probably so many times that it's actually the reason why complete failure is possible. Yeah. Is because of little failure.
Yeah. I mean, I cut it in half and start again the next day. So if the goal was an hour of exercise, cut it down to 30 minutes and try it again the next day. And if 30 minutes fails, cut it down to 15. And if 15 fails, do 7.5 minutes.
Do you think it's wise to make up for lost
I just wouldn't even focus on the past at all. I wouldn't even just try to double up. I would just try to start again and just begin over again. So it's like if the goal is meditating 30 minutes a day and you're like, oh, I dropped the ball, then because it's the psychological aspect, right? It's like the psychology of like, oh, I just got up. I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes. Like, it's a long time. I just like, I have an hour and I'd rather just like chill. I'd rather like just like put on the news and drink coffee. Right. So if you're like, you have to decrease to the number where you feel like you can easily do it.
Right. We set very high goals, which are really like long-term goals. Right. But they defeat us immediately. Right. Because it's like, let's say your goal is to meditate 4 hours a day. Like, good luck making that your first goal, like from going from 0 hours. Right. Unless you're some kind of differently wired human, that just is not possible for most people.
So the real question is, what's the habit you can do every day for 100 days rather than what can you do a lot in a short period of time?
Like what's like the little thing I can do today that I could do, that I'm capable of doing, that I actually would do, that would like lead to better life. Jordan Peterson talks about that framework for making changes, is like doing the little bitest that you could do, that you would do, that would improve your life. Right. And when you think about it in that frame, it's not so difficult, because it's like 5 minutes of meditation, do it at like the bus stop. Do it while you're standing, at a red light, or not standing, but sitting. Hopefully you're not standing at a red light. Right. Because then you're just wasting the crosswalk. But, doing like 5 minutes a day or something, like just in the mind, it seems really easy, but it's all about like momentum. Yep. So what role does snowballing play in this process of building habits?
To me, that's all it is what we talked about. It's like the psychological aspect of, you build that self-efficacy, the self-belief, by being like, oh, I've been able to do this 5 minutes a day. I could probably do 6 tomorrow. Or, I've eaten 1 healthy breakfast today. I don't have to get my, pastry and coffee from Starbucks. So it's not about getting the results right away. It's more so about building the self-belief. Like, I can do it this time. That's like the longevity aspect, versus, because like all of these, like weight loss never ends. Like it doesn't stop. You don't like get to your ideal physique and you're like, all right, back to cakes. Like, you got to do this for 50 years, 20 years, 70 years. Like, it's forever. So it's like, if that habit you said you're going to do, if you can really not do that for life, great, then do it. But if you said you're never going to eat sugar for life, that's just not real life. So it's like, what's going to be the habit that's sustainable basically forever? Right. That's like the real question.
Maybe eat sugar like 1 day a week or something like that. Something that you're like, you don't immediately repulse against when you even think about it. Right. Because right now I was telling you I'm doing very low carb and I haven't eaten sugar for a couple of days at all. Kind of help with the holidays. Yeah. And but to say that I'm not going to eat sugar for life, that just seems like a ridiculous goal that will not only will it not be possible likely without like severe pain, right? But it'll also probably just lead me to binging on sugar one day. Like maybe like I'll really grit my teeth and for 3 months, like 0 sugar, like none, not even like a little bit of honey in my tea. Nope, not at all. Right. Not even a fruit, right? Then like on, one day I'm just going to like just lose it when I'm just feeling really crappy or something like that. Yep. I'm going to eat a whole cake. Yeah. Instead of just like being a little bit more reasonable about what's possible. Right. And I think I actually kind of think it's psychological self-sabotage. One of the ways I think that we prevent ourselves from making the changes is we set really high goals so that we can fail. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Like you set a really high goal and you know deep down you won't actually do it.
Yep.
And it's such a high goal that when you fail at it, you're like, oh, but it was a high goal. I mean, but who does that help to think in that way? It helps nobody. Better make those little changes.
Yeah.
So what role does visualization play in making these changes, and what are some things that you like to do visualization wise for making habit change, lifestyle change for health, those kind of things?
So this first got on my radar after reading Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon, lived in the 1800s to early mid 1900s, and he noticed that he'd have patients come in with like some obvious disfigurement. Sometimes it's just a big nose. Sometimes it's a weird facial thing. Sometimes it's from an accident. And he noticed that they would say like, this is impacting my confidence. But a certain percentage of his patients, after he did the procedure and made them look beautiful, their confidence never changed. And so he became really curious. Like, well, you said it was about me fixing your nose to this woman. Now she has a beautiful nose, looks great, like a model. But her self-esteem was the same as it was before. And that had led him to this concept of the self-image, and that the self-image is something that's generated more internally. It's combined, internal, external, but not always by changing the external does the self-image change internally. And so one of the things he recommended was to reset that is doing a series of visualizations where you visualize yourself as you'd like to be. So I've actually found it can be really helpful and really does work, where it's like my Monday routine is I go to Starbucks and I get the cup of coffee, I put in 5 sugars, and I get like a pastry. This time, every morning I visualize, I go to Starbucks, I get the fruit bowl, and I get the coffee. And like I found that by visualizing that, it actually does change your life in subtle ways. Like it will change the way you view yourself. And that was really interesting because I didn't think you could do it like that. But it really is like your inner director, like you're directing the movie differently this time. And like you go through your day, Starbucks, I get a fruit bowl and a coffee. Afternoon, I'm not getting a cookie. I'm going to be getting something else. That's a snack. And I found that it's a really surprisingly effective way to kind of like future pace in the right way.
So you just visualize the action. Do you also, I know we've spoken about this, visualize or feel the emotion that's along with what it would actually feel like to be that person, or what you would feel like after you actually did that?
Totally.
Because that's important, right? For like exercising. In the moment, it sucks a lot of times. I mean, if you're doing any kind of like serious exercising, like it's gonna not be pleasant,
right?
Like if you're you're an Olympian, you're a high level trainer, you're training for martial arts. Like if you're not like, oh my God, then you're actually not pushing yourself to the level where you need to be for growth. Like maintenance and just kind of like running a little bit on the elliptical is like a different thing than like the growth,
right?
But like what I like to do is focus on how I know I will feel after.
Yep.
Because it's pretty consistent. Like after like a especially challenging workout, like you feel amazing. It's like a drug or something. You feel like you're on top of the world. And it's not only the endorphins, although it probably is a good portion of endorphins.
So you're actually high.
Yeah, you're just high on your own body supply.
Yep.
I think it's just that aspect of whenever we overcome challenges, it kind of like adds a penny in our like self-esteem bank. From a real source that doesn't like easily leave.
Yeah.
Because if your self-esteem is from, people telling you so great or this or that, like that's very superficial.
Right.
And you don't really believe in it on a deep level. Like maybe the woman who had the nose change, like everyone was like, oh, you look so good now. But like her self-esteem bank was so low that like it didn't like do anything for her. Like she needed to build that up. And then she probably wouldn't have even cared about the nose thing.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I think that's a good place to stop it off for now. I think this is a very fruitful subject, but it's time for us to eat some Chinese food.
Let's do it.
Healthy Chinese food.
Chinese food. Debatable.
Fried chicken.
Fried in oil Chinese food.
Any final things for our audience about, let's say somebody is listening to this and they're like, I want to make, a habit change, but I'm not sure what to do. What do you tell them?
I think the biggest thing is try to find something that generates enough hunger to live a better life. And if you can, find another person, do it for somebody else if you have to in the short run. Do it, get fitter so you're alive for your kids. build a business so that you can support your parents or support your spouse, or you can stay home. Try to find something that really touches you emotionally when you think of like what drives you, and keep asking why. And then I would just try to find a way to hold yourself accountable, whether it is paying somebody or it is going with friends. Like find a way that there are actual consequences for you not going beyond just yourself, like let down other people, because humans will often consistently do for other people what they will not do for themselves. And that's proven itself throughout time, immemorial. So
Yeah, I think that's very, very sagely words. So what I understand from this and my own experience is, first you have to have a want. You have to have a desire to make the change, right? If you don't have the desire, look for a desire.
Right.
Because it's there somewhere. I mean, I think it's inherently in human nature to improve and to grow. And anything that isn't there's something missing. And then find your why, of like why you desire it.
Yeah.
And if you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, as you said, and then expand your why to include people outside of yourself and kind of put yourself in a web of responsibility and accountability to others and to yourself, it really is it's actually really easy to make lifestyle change through that lens. If you're just like always pushing uphill and you're not sure why you're doing it, like, yeah, you're training willpower. You're training your ability to do things when you don't want to.
Right.
But that's only one piece of the living a good life. That's only one. Discipline is only one percentage of it.
Totally.
There's a lot of other factors that are important to actually sustaining or being happy. There's high-level athletes who you always tell that story. Who was the tennis player?
Agassi.
He was forced by his father to play tennis, and he became like the greatest. But he hates tennis apparently.
He always hated it, and like he in his biography
so
he talks about he told people and they like laugh. They thought it was a joke. And
It's
he's like,
funny.
He's like, no, I really hate it. Like I've always hated it. He's like, I still hate it.
Right.
And then he became a drug addict eventually.
So be like Agassi, but actually like what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
All right. That's perfect.
Thank you guys for listening to the Herbal Hour podcast. Just want to make another announcement. HolisticPsyche.com will soon be live. I want you guys to check that out. There's going to be articles on natural herbs for anxiety, depression, insomnia, all the mental wellness things, personal stories of getting to holistic mental wellness, and much, much more. So check it out. It's at HolisticPsyche.com, HolisticPsyche. Hope to see you guys there. We're accepting submissions from anyone in the community. Any stories about struggles in mental wellness, how you reached a good state without using pharmaceuticals, or maybe using pharmaceuticals. Essentially, all of the natural approaches to mental wellness. Thanks again for listening, guys. If you appreciate the show, like, subscribe, make some good comments, especially on Apple Podcasts. We have a story hour this week. It's going to be the book 2 of the Iliad. So if you guys want to check that out. And next week, we have some great stuff planned as well.